Are you looking for some strategies to help you deal with tantrums and meltdowns and outbursts and other big emotions in your children? You're in the right place. That is such a common problem that I hear from the parents that I work with. So, number one, if you're experiencing that issue, you're not alone. Number two, it is really difficult to know how to handle it and resolve and eliminate these big emotions and big behavior issues. And number three, the good news, I'm Dr. Ellen, and I'm going to be talking about a lot of useful strategies that the parents that I work with say is really helpful. So make yourself comfortable. I know that this is really a pressing, difficult topic. And whether your kids are toddlers, they talk about the terrible twos, but it's not just kids that are two. So whether your kids are toddlers or older kids or tweens or teens, meltdowns and outbursts occur. In older kids, they're usually trying to test their autonomy and independence. And so the discussions are often different. But again, there are a lot of commonalities that I want to discuss that I think can help parents handle the situations and eliminate the occurrences from happening. So first, I want to talk about the big emotions and what happens when kids are tantruming. And I want you to try to think of it from a child's perspective. Let's think about what their experience is. So again, I'm going to use some common examples. When kids get into a tantrum, sometimes it's because you tell them we have to leave the park. They don't want to leave the park. Or sometimes it's because they want an ice cream or a cookie and you tell them no. Or it might be because a friend or a sibling is playing with a toy and suddenly they want that toy. And again, it ends up in a child having a meltdown. Why is that? Well, when the kids are tantruming, they're in the emotional part of their brain. There are a lot of different parts of the brain. But when I'm talking about this issue, there are two important parts. One is the emotional part, and one is the thinking part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. And the areas of the brain are not fully developed when kids are young. So when kids have those big emotions and they're in their emotional part of the brain, well, that part of the brain isn't fully developed and they really don't know how to handle their emotions. They don't know what to do to express themselves or to handle their emotions. And what they end up doing, the way I interpret it, is when kids come into the world and they're born, when they need something, when they're upset, when they're hungry, when they need a diaper change, they cry out, they scream for attention. That's their communication. That's the way they communicate. And so tantruming comes really from a primal response that kids come into the world knowing. And they really don't know how to handle their emotions otherwise when they're at the stages when they have meltdowns and tantrums. They're just telling you they're upset about something. Maybe they're angry or upset or sad or disappointed. Sometimes tantrums occur because kids are tired or overstimulated or out of their regular routine that they usually do. And again, so kids can't handle their emotions and they just let off steam. They just let it all go. So the first important thing to know is that kids can't learn while they're in a tantrum. So you may start explaining to them, it's 5 o'clock and we need to go home because I have to cook dinner and we have this to do. Kids really can't understand that when they're tantruming. All they understand is the primary, they're upset, they can't do what they want. And our immediate reaction when kids are yelling and screaming and in a tantrum, we get so frustrated. And very often we want to yell at them. Stop yelling and screaming like that. Stop crying. Or sometimes we want to give them a timeout or punish them. If you don't stop that, you're going to lose screen time, or you're going to have to sit in your room. Go sit in your room. When we do that, here's what's happened. First of all, kids can't learn during a tantrum. If you send them and punish them to their own room, you're really telling them, I know you're upset, but I can't be there for you. Go handle it yourself. And they really can handle it themselves. So number one of the keys is why punishment and consequences and timeout, which is an initial response. And it's really an old response that parents often use that doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Well, one thing is that kids don't learn when they're in their emotional brain. They just can't learn. And the other is if you yell at a child when they're in their emotional brain, they're not learning what to do next time they have that same trigger. Again, they're not learning. They're just waiting and crying, and you're waiting for them to stop, but they're not in teaching mode. And I kind of have a funny example to use to explain how kids aren't learning when they're in timeout. So imagine you're at work and the boss gives you a rule that you don't like, and you complain about the rule. And imagine the boss says to you, I don't want to hear you complaining. Go sit in your office. Now, if you go to the office, you're not going to go and sit in the office and think, well, actually, the rule is really a good rule. I can't wait to do this rule. You're probably going to sit in your office and stew and think about how stupid this rule is, that it's really unfair that it's being handed down to you, and that the boss, the person who's handing down the rule, is being unfair to you. So again, you can see when you're in your emotional part of your brain, you're not really learning, you're not understanding, and a child isn't learning what to do when that trigger happens again. Number two in the keys to understanding how to handle tantrums is, again, that tantrums and meltdowns are a communication tool that kids use. Their brains aren't fully developed. They don't know how to express their emotions, but you can learn how to help them express their emotions. And I'm going to be talking about that in the rest of the keys that we talk about today. Number three, which is a really important first step, validate their feelings. So it's really helpful to say, for example, to your child, I understand you're sad that we have to leave the park. I know you'd rather stay here, but we need to go home and have dinner. And after dinner, maybe we can read a good book together. So what you're doing in that is you're validating, you're showing that you understand them. And it's really a human response. Everybody wants to be understood. Everybody wants their voice to be heard. So it's true with kids too. And very often with kids who are tantruming, if you can enunciate what's on their mind, if you can show you understand them, that's the first step in getting them to quiet down, because they know they've been heard. So it's really helpful. Another tool is to redirect them. So if you notice, when I said what I was talking about before, when you tell them, when we leave the park, when we get home after dinner, we can read a book. What book would you like to read tonight? Well, suddenly they have something else to think about. You've redirected them. And when they start thinking about what book they want to read tonight, they're upset about the park. So redirecting them sometimes can take them out of their emotional state, if you can find something that they'll be interested in. And again, the important thing, I am encouraging you to communicate with your child if they are having a meltdown or a tantrum, but by communicating with them, I am not at all suggesting that you give in to what they're yelling for. So if they want to stay at the park, don't say to them, okay, we could stay another 10 or 20 minutes at the park, or you can have your ice cream. No, because then you're rewarding their bad behavior, and then they're motivated to do it again. So you don't want to give in, but what you do want to do, what is important, is to make an emotional connection with them. So to validate their feelings, you might even say, would you like to come and sit next to me? Or you might even say, would you like a hug? Come over here for a hug. Let me give you a hug. And that's not rewarding them because you're not giving them what they want, but it is showing them that you care about them and that you validate how they feel. And that is another step that can be helpful. So number 4 is to discuss coping skills at quiet times in life. So again, it's not really helpful to try to discuss logic with kids when they're in their emotional brain during a tantrum or an outburst. But during quiet times, discuss emotions with kids. Teach them to name their emotions. I feel sad. I feel disappointed. I feel frustrated. I feel whatever. Teach them to name their emotions, because naming is the first step of knowing how to deal with them, of knowing how they feel. So what does it feel like when you're sad? And what can you do when you feel sad? Now you're teaching them how to handle their emotions. And you might say to them, sometimes when I feel sad, I think about happy times, things that have made me happy. Or sometimes when I feel sad, I take a few deep breaths, or I count to 10. So again, teaching kids about emotions is really helpful in bringing them out of the phase of those big emotions and teaching them to handle how they feel. A lot of people are creating what's called time-in centers, where kids have a table or an area where they can go, and if they're upset or sad, they have resources where they can deal with emotions. They may have paper and crayons or paints, or some music where they can sing along with music or dance along with music. And I have a list of things. They may have been taught to do some yoga. They may work on a puzzle or stretch their arms and legs, or do a fun dance, or write in a notebook, or play with a pet, or hold a stress ball, squeeze a stress ball. And a lot of coaches are suggesting that people create what they're calling time-in centers. I like the idea of creating an area. I don't love the name time in, because for me, it's too similar to time out. And I think it can be confusing to kids, and they may think of it as a punishment, which it really isn't. So the term, I think, can be confusing and misleading. So I like calling it a comfort center, and letting kids know that they have a comfort center that they can go to and use if they're feeling big emotions. I think that can be really helpful. Number 5 is knowing what your child's triggers are. So if they have a meltdown, what was it that started them off, that led them into this big emotion? Very often, transition points can lead to meltdowns. So, like I said, time to leave the park, or time to leave a friend's house, or time to leave the house and get into the car. And by knowing your child's triggers, it can help you figure out at the first sign when you're seeing a big emotion to start discussing with your child. Are you feeling sad or upset? What can you do to handle your feeling? How about if you take some deep breaths? Or how about if you stretch your arms and your legs, or whatever it is that works for your child and you. So again, knowing a child's triggers can be really helpful. So today we talked about a number of keys to handling those big emotions that kids sometimes have. We talked about some strategies. An important one is staying calm, because if you start yelling at your child when they're yelling and upset, what happens is there's two people who are yelling and in their emotional centers, and that doesn't solve any problem. So you want to be calm. You want to make an emotional connection with your child, validate their feelings. In quiet times, teach them about their emotions. And one thing that's really different when I work with my parents and kids from lots of other videos and trainings that I see is not only do I discuss that you help your kids handle when they're sad or angry or upset or frustrated, but I'd like you also to discuss what it feels like and what kids do when they're happy and excited, some of the good emotions, because I want us to teach our kids to foster their good emotions as well, not just their bad emotions. I think it's really, really helpful and optimistic to pay attention and role model and help kids develop happy feelings, optimistic feelings, excited feelings, good feelings. Again, all of this is part of the plan to eliminate and bring down those tantrums and big emotions. Now, if you have a child who's older, a teen or a tween, very often the meltdowns are a result of kids' trials for autonomy or to be independent. So they may ask to go to a party that you say no, or they may ask to stay out late and you say no. And again, you're not going to turn around and say yes if they get upset or disappointed, but you can talk to them about what they can do and about how to handle disappointment, and that life brings us many happy things in life and times when we do feel we don't get what we'd like. And this is what we can do in those situations. It's really helpful and important as parents that we teach our kids that life is not 100% satisfying and going our way. And when there are challenges and disappointments, there are helpful ways of dealing with them that don't cause those big emotions. So again, I hope this was helpful. If you like this video, if it was helpful, please hit thumbs up. Please subscribe so you'll know when I come out with new videos. I come out with a new one each week. And feel free to share this with other parents who you feel can benefit from it. So again, I love bringing empowering strategies to parents. I will be back again next week with another video on another topic. If you have a topic that you'd like me to talk about, or if you'd like to talk to me and reach out to me, if you're interested in working with me directly, I will try to put my calendar below, and my email is ellenwillhelp@gmail.com. So join me again next week for another video on another topic. And until then, be strong, be empowered, and let's talk again soon.